welcome to the next session of the FuturePrint Tech Fest, and we're talking about collaboration here. And I'm very pleased to have a great group of panelists with me. But just to explain why we're talking about collaboration, as you know, we've been thinking about these 5 steps towards successful inkjet projects. And this third step is the crucial one that involves getting various companies to work together, to be collaborative and deliver, hopefully, the perfect product. I mean, to be honest with you, what we're talking about here is an inkjet project that needs to hit that sweet spot, typically a particular application. And that's difficult, and it's difficult to find something that's unique, not an off-the-shelf product. It's not really as simple, is it, as buying one machine and simply getting on with it. So what we're talking about here really is something that's multi-layered, possibly multi-layered technology, involve different inks, different software. So we wanted to bring together a group that represent all those different parts that create this final product. And here we are today. So let me introduce the group we have with me. On my left, I have Matt Brooks of Inka Digital. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Fraser. Afternoon, everybody.
I have Jamie Walsh.
Hi there, how are you?
Jamie of...
I'm from Solomar Systems, based out in San Diego. So we're a workflow software company, 30-year heritage in the business, bringing together multi-processes and disciplines across a range of applications and industries.
Fantastic, thank you. Jason Smith, CTO of Integration Technology.
Sure. Good afternoon.
Welcome. And Simon Daplin of Sun Chemical.
Hi, Fraser.
Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
So we're talking about collaboration here, and I guess people are thinking, well, what does that mean? What's it mean when we're talking collaboration with the inkjet market? So let's start with Simon. What do we mean by collaboration? What's the word and the essence we're trying to get over when we're talking about an inkjet project?
Well, inkjet is a pretty complex science and workflow. So really by collaboration, we're bringing together groups of companies that can work together effectively to deliver a solution. As you mentioned within the panel, we all have a subject matter expertise, be it ink or software or the drying or integration of a solution. And the collaborative part of it is breaking down the barriers, talking to each other, realizing what the customer wants to achieve, why they want to achieve it, and how we can work together to enable them to a successful integration of inkjet.
We've joked before, haven't we, about ink often being the last thing that people look at on one of these projects. And obviously, working for Sun Chemicals, you've probably got a view on that, haven't you?
Sure. So it is sometimes a frustration. It's not always the case, but we sometimes arrive to a project where a system's been designed, the path of how it's going to be integrated has been designed, the drying system, the handling system, the software, the print heads, all the kind of the high ticket items, the machine has been built, and then they try and retrofit a fluid or find an ink solution that will meet that requirement. And the trouble is, if you don't consider fluid somewhere near the beginning, at least in parallel with some of the other decisions you're making, ultimately it's the ink that ends up on the product that's being printed. It's the ink that then has to go and sit in the environment, perform a function as part of a product. And in order for it to sit in the workflow correctly, you need to understand what that is first. You can't define what the drying system is going to be, for example, before you've selected what ink technology you're trying to dry. And we have been involved in projects, I have personally, a number of times over the last kind of 10, 12 years, where ink has been kind of the last thing because it's not the technology item. It's not a print head. It's not a system. It's not some cool software.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so trying to then manipulate an ink to work with all the other components is much more challenging than considering it on an equal footing at the start and talking about ink plus drying plus print head right at the beginning, so that you can ultimately achieve the result a lot quicker. Yeah,
and I guess, Jamie, perhaps as a software specialist, you've probably got a similar view, haven't you?
I'd say it's very similar. Software is often, the forgotten piece of the jigsaw. everybody focuses in on the big ticket investment of the hardware and all of the technology that goes into that platform. But actually, when you kind of step back a little bit and look at all of the key processes that need to take place, the manufacturing stages, and that includes everything that everybody on this panel is involved in. It's how do you bring those all together? So from a software perspective, collaboration is key for us. We bring to market a successful range of products, but it's how we interact with all of those other stages within the manufacturing process that's really important to us. And our branding is chemistry, and chemistry is all about interactions and reactions. Now, those don't take place in isolation. It's about how we interact with the systems of other manufacturers that gives the customer the end result that they're looking for.
Sure. Yeah. So both of you are reflecting on the fact that, this is really about bringing together lots of masters of lots of different elements to create the perfect product rather than a one-stop shop. I want to ask Matt, obviously, Inca Digital, machine technology, how do you see it in terms of the collaboration?
I think it's an interesting question, Fraser, and I think from Inca's point of view, it's always usually built around a print engine, and we'll develop a print engine to a specification that is generally determined from the market, and our involvement then in terms of collaboration is usually with somebody like an ink vendor.
Yeah, sure.
But with the intention of meeting that specification, and that could be for speed, throughput, material range, different market applications, and it's almost like one shop doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
So being open and a willingness to communicate and listen to what the end user's needs are is really important for us for collaboration. If we don't listen to those end user needs, then we almost stay in this kind of rabbit hole of, right, that's the fastest printer, that's what we're going to develop, and it doesn't really matter about everything else. But getting the key stakeholders, in the early stages of the project is key for Inca, because that way it's an open communication path. We have obviously one eye on the market specification, but without kind of continuous assessment of that through a collaboration partnership. Think of collaboration, I think of partnership, rather than a supplier and buyer type situation. I think of it as a partnership, and it's a two-way exchange then for the good of everybody involved.
Well, why do you think industrial inkjet in particular reflects the need for those kind of combined collaborative projects rather than wide format or commercial print?
I think generally it's probably because they involve players who have got expertise in areas that are necessary for the success, whereas kind of wide format, I would say, if you look at an inkjet printer for wide format, it doesn't need much involvement in terms of other equipment surrounding it, whereas for industrial inkjet and the applications and markets, generally you'll need to speak to some sort of automation provider, some sort of workflow solution provider, some sort of ink vendor, and it kind of opens it up to be a more open type project in that respect. So you have to be open to collaborate with the partners, whereas wide format tends to be, this is the printer, this is the speed, it's off the shelf. Here you go, Mr. Customer.
Yep. Simon, you were sort of nodding there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the wide format graphics is basically what you see is what you get. You're buying something off the shelf. It's a very known market. Everybody knows when they're buying a wide format printer what it's going to do, what they need it to do, and how it's going to work for their business. In these industrial inkjet integration projects, we're really talking to industries that are either very comfortable with a conventional or an analog print process, or are investing in a new technology but don't really know how it's going to work for them, how to integrate it into their particular workflow, how to get the software integration so they can manage print jobs, manage the workflow, not only of the printing part, but everything that comes before and the finishing part, which is often kind of another part of the process that we don't talk a lot about, is the full application understanding and making sure that the ink and the substrate and the print head and the handling systems are all working harmoniously. Yeah. So it's not really an off-the-shelf solution in many cases. So you have to bring these expertise together in a partnership. I think partnership's absolutely the right word to deliver.
I just want to draw Jason in on here. Obviously, curing another part of the kind of delivery of the whole technology. How important is it to be working closely with other partners? Obviously, integration technology already work with some partners.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's critical, and especially if you can get involved in the early stages, because it's very easy just to choose a product from data sheets, basically, and think this is the right one. It's got the right output power. It's got the right dose, whatever. But it's the little subtleties that can really help. Vibration, is that going to be an issue for you? Is it going to affect your print? Airflow movement, stray light, this sort of thing. These are all things that ourselves are sort of experts in, and we can help out, and we can sort of advise not just which is the best product for the application, but also is it going to be a problem? Why don't you look at this?
Yeah. And do you also think that in terms of you as a manufacturer of a piece of technology, you need to be very flexible and be adaptable so that you can kind of, these are bespoke products we're developing here. Would you agree?
Indeed. I think we try very much when somebody buys a single system for us to get them to buy something which is off the shelf, because it just saves a lot of effort. But fundamentally, anybody who's going to be buying a serial piece of equipment time and time again, we want to work with them. We want them to have exactly what works for them and works best on their machine. So everything ends up being modified in some way and customised.
Sure.
And so that might just be electrical connections coming out of different places, but often there's other subtleties such as sort of light masks or baffles, or directing the airflow in slightly different directions.
I'm particularly interested in if someone's listening to this discussion and thinking about a project that they want to work on, the one thing that would concern me if I was going through this process would be the project management, if that makes sense. That there's four of us here, there's four of you here, all from different parts of the business. Who manages the project when you've got four parties? How do you work that into the system? Matt?
Good question. I think
good. I'm glad I asked a good question.
You always got a good question, Fraser. I think what's really important is to have nominate a project manager who has maybe is a little bit removed in the sense of his technical understanding or skill, but understands the complete end-to-end objective of the project, and the ability then to be able to communicate and listen to every stakeholder that's necessary to make the project a success. The ability to be organised and produce milestone measurements that suit everybody that's involved at various stages.
I know that you've worked with partners like Zund, for example. So Inca and Zund are working on a project. How does that work together when you've got different teams kind of weaving it together?
I think it works well, but I think it works well because we understand what our individual responsibilities are as part of the project and part of the solution, but then as a global kind of ownership of the integration project, we are very much together and very much aligned and know who has what level of responsibility and accountability, inevitably. And I think what's really important for the end user, the client, is to know who is their point of contact,
sure,
and who is delivering the all the information. It's always challenging when you have lots of people involved in a project, but I think fundamentally, without all of those skills and responsibilities, no project is a success.
Yeah, sure. And similarly, Jason, you've got projects where you're working with other companies. How's that kind of work as a project?
If we can get involved in the early days, in the integration of the system, it works so much better in terms of being able to do things like offering some of the sort of like the little subtleties that we can do in terms of the simulation, for example. We've had applications in the past where we've had problems with people curing ink on the inkjet heads, and obviously that's a catastrophic thing that to happen. And it might not happen straight away. It might happen over months in the field, basically, that slowly the heads start to block up. And so we can work with them with some of the sort of behind the curtain products that we have in terms of things like simulation. And we can look at those and advise how best to position your UV curing lamps and just little subtleties, the directions they point in, the distances, some things to do to stop reflection back into the print heads.
Jamie, you're sort of nodding there. Do you tend to agree?
Yeah, it's. I think Matt's paid reference to it. When you've got lots of parties involved, even at a small number, you need to take those business egos out of it, because you've got a common goal. And that's what the customer is looking for you as a group of suppliers or vendors to come together to deliver. If you start kind of crossing the boundaries of, where you're offering it takes you, then you're gonna devalue the whole process. So leadership is key. There has to be somebody, as you say, with a neutral perspective on this. It depends on how you've become involved in the project. We work with a lot of OEM partners of hardware, for instance, and it's quite often that their salespeople or their sales analysts will form kind of that leadership position, and they'll be looking for expertise from a finishing partner, a software partner, a media partner. And it's about their skill to bring the strengths of each of those individuals together and their company's offering to make sure the customer gets what they want. Because ultimately the customer wants the best solution for the right budget in the right kind of time frame. And it's getting all of the parties going in the same direction from our perspective.
And often this is going to be a case that it's an unusual application. There's depositing an ink on something different, therefore it's a unique requirement, isn't it? So I guess that's the important bit.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to understanding what value and what contribution your business brings to the party. I can bring expertise in software and workflow. I'm not going to cross over into curing ink. It's not my bag. If I try to make a point from that perspective, I'm going to do myself a disservice in there, and that's not the right thing for the customer.
Simon, have you got sort of typical examples that you have of working in collaboration and how it's working effectively?
Yeah, I think it's fundamental. If you're not willing to have an open discussion with the other partners on the project, then you're going to stall very quickly. I think examples are where it's not for us. It's slightly different actually. It's not always about just delivering the ink and saying, well, the ink does this. It sticks to the substrate, so our job's done. It's really about understanding what all the other components of the system are doing and how our part of that works together with the drying. For example, the ink plus drying is kind of one of the critical kind of combinations that's needed in any project, whether it's a water-based or a UV. It's fundamental to understand what speed are we drying at, what's the substrate, is there any impact of the ink drying need on the delicacy of the substrate or what the final purpose of the print is. So, for example, if a big topic now is flexible packaging, which is on very thin film plastic. And so there's only a certain heat tolerance that can take. Everybody wants to move towards a water-based solution for that. So getting the drying right, so it's at the right temperature but meets the print quality requirement. So you need to dry it quickly so that the water doesn't spread on a surface that isn't porous. But it's doing it at the speed at which the production line needs to go. Those are the areas where you really have to talk to everybody, including the customer, most of all the customer, to really understand what's he trying to achieve, what's his floor space to do that, how can we work together with the drying partner to ensure that the ink plus the substrate plus the drying are all seamlessly working together to deliver the final solution.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And with integration technology, I mean, obviously your curing systems, you can adapt them, can you, in terms of the technology for a particular need?
Yes, we tend to have key pieces of technology that we use just all the time, which is just like the ultimate reliability, like the LEDs and the way that we mount the LEDs and also the drive electronics. But pretty much what they're bolted to can be relatively flexible, so we can chop and change those to suit the application if we need to. One of the things that you just said about the working together is a difficulty in terms of NDAs, which I think was covered elsewhere. But we need to keep an open approach to how strict our NDAs are, and perhaps maybe modifying them so that they allow intercompany collaboration, so that I can talk to you about the ink, and I don't just have to go back to Matt, for example, and
that's a good point. That NDA issue is similar. Do you sense that as well?
Yeah, I think it can get quite complicated if you sort of, especially if you're involved directly with a client, or maybe more complicated if you're not actually directly involved with the client and you're brought in as a third party partner, and there's obviously ways around it for you as a provider, a solution provider, to have an individual NDA or to have a collaborative NDA. I think ultimately there'll always be some sensitivity around IP and various technical elements, but the common goal generally is to succeed, and a review of that certainly wouldn't go amiss. But I think we can all use our common sense and not give trade secrets away to come up with the right solution.
On that kind of issue, let's say I'm the customer. I mean, we put a panel together of various component parts here. How do you choose who to work with in terms of collaboration? Are you driven by the project leader, the person asking for the requirement, the customer, or are you driven by your working relationships with people? Simon, who do you work with? Will you work with anyone?
Essentially, yeah, we're agnostic. I mean, the industry has evolved to a level where there's so much technology of a high quality offered by so many parties that customers can effectively select who they want to work with based on either personal experience or industry experience or having seen a solution before. So that's something. Ultimately, it's the customer that governs the direction. For us, a lot is dictated by the print head that's selected. So we have to match the fluid in terms of viscosity and the way it will drive through the print head. So that's a key relationship for us to understand and work closely with all the print head providers, so that as and when we're brought onto a project, that one's there, that we understand each other's way of working, what each is responsible for, and how we deliver something that doesn't interrupt the customer project or causes issues at an early point. And again, flexibility in NDA, of course, would always be better, because quite often you're in an NDA with the final customer but aren't necessarily allowed to talk directly to some of the collaboration partners, and that's where strong project management really is.
Yeah, that challenge
to run that.
Yeah, it's exactly what we just said. Is that challenge the project manager who's trying to run the whole project, but then there's not necessarily the smooth communication between the different people involved in this. Would you agree with what Simon was saying there?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Interesting. So, this if you're thinking about collaboration, working with someone, what are the potential pitfalls, if it makes sense, of not working like this? What do you think, Jamie?
Well, nobody is all powerful. We talk, or there's lots of talk about islands of isolation, and those are dangerous places to get to. So it depends on the need of the customer and what they're looking to achieve, because there are some projects that you work on and you can work in isolation to deliver the requirements of the customer. But I think in the context of this panel discussion, and certainly the TechFest kind of sessions, this is about bigger, wider projects where you're looking at addressing multiple needs. And that's where it is key that the industry learns to work together in a better way, appreciate the disciplines and the functionalities of other businesses as well. And to do that, and at Solomar we provide a set of software solutions. We're responsible for the development, the management and upkeep of those solutions, but we realise we can't do everything. So we partner with other software providers. So, for instance, in the US, we work with a company called BCC. So they provide mail cleansing software. It's not a discipline that we do. They're experts in that field. But we understand and we have a working relationship about how we can transfer the data between the two systems to meet the needs of the customer. So, again, it's keeping that customer focus is absolutely critical.
I guess because if we were sitting perhaps with a very big vendor, let's say, I don't know, a large major manufacturer of technology who also make inks, who also have their own software, they'd probably argue against what you guys are saying by saying one-stop shop, one-stop solution. So why? Because that's an argument, isn't it?
Absolutely,
Simon?
It's an argument. If you're a customer, the appeal of going to one single entity and the risk management lying with one person is absolutely attractive. And a huge part of our business is working together with OEMs who ultimately then become a solution provider to the end user. So we're technologically enabling them, but they become the face to the customer of a solution. In a collaboration partnership, I guess what the benefit that you get is direct access to expertise in the individual areas. Yeah. So you can talk to the chemistry provider, you can have a one-on-one discussion with the dryer, with the software, with the integrator, and that there's something valuable about that. I mean, and both will sit harmoniously in this industry. There's no doubt that there's absolutely a place for a solution provider where everything is kind of managed and the risk is taken by a single entity, if you like, who's probably really being a project manager and managing maybe a bunch of us behind the scenes in any case, rather than trying to project manage yourself. But there's validity in both reasons. No doubt.
Yeah. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think the industry has seen some of these of the larger players do exactly what you suggested there, Fraser. Is they've become the one-stop shop and they've tried to do it all themselves. And I think I've worked for one or two of them.
You definitely have.
Yeah. And they thought, yes, we can do this. We've got the dollars, we've got the resources to do it. However, there's that, getting back to this, what's your core business?
Yeah.
And when you really focus in on what your core business is, that's where your true value is. Yeah. And then it means, well, let's focus on this bit. Let's let the experts in other areas come to the party. And as you said, you enable that player to become the face of the project and to bring in the disciplines behind the scenes. And as long as the customer, goes back to it again, as long as the customer gets the result that they were looking for, then they should be happy.
And as you said, or all of you have said, you're the specialists, aren't you, in your segments. So you'd expect you guys to know better than a kind of one-stop shop solution, perhaps.
Our companies will have hundreds of years of experience in these things, even in a relatively new technology like Inkjet. And so not going for those that knowledge and trying to extract that is really, it's you're missing something, basically, I think.
Yeah. And I think in this particular segment that we're talking a lot about, which is sort of industrial inkjet opportunities, which are often bespoke projects, aren't they? Are unique, that someone's come along and said, I want you to print on this. I want to print something different on a different material, in a different way, in a different shape. That's why it's important that they talk to all of you rather than try and force a machine to work to do the job that they want it to do. So it completely makes sense. I just wonder whether there's a cost saving. Is there an element of demonstrable cost saving of working with partners in a collaborative way or one-stop shop? So, Matt, what's your thought on that? And where's that cost saving? Where is that cost saving?
I think generally the cost saving probably is maybe a little bit hidden, but the upfront investment cost perhaps maybe not so great. And the reason I say that is generally, Inca, or I'm sure same for Sun and integration technology, and for Jamie, is that we have our preferred partners and suppliers who we want to work with and collaborate with, but ultimately the customer's probably got a preferred like for example, pre-press, they've probably got a preferred workflow or rip vendor. On the finishing side, they've probably got a preferred cutting or solution provider, and they've probably got a preferred ink vendor. They've probably got some sort of economics in terms of total cost of ownership that works for them. So, we find that they often come to us and say, I've selected, part A, part B, and part C, and I need to get to D, and I need you to help me get to D. So the cost saving generally comes because you haven't got to start from the ground up. The customer's already established, kind of the key mechanisms to get there, and I think that's where a lot of the costs can be saved.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
From otherwise, I think from one-stop shop, it's one solution fits all. You've got to project your costs beforehand, and then convince that end user to pay something towards the development of that, and that can be challenging.
Yeah, because you're kind of in essence saying to them, it's nearly perfect, but I need you to tweak this, and this. So there might be some cost implications
Absolutely.
there. Any thoughts from Simon on costs?
Yeah, I think in general, when people are talking about industrial inkjet and they need a collaborative project, what there isn't necessarily is an off-the-shelf solution that's going to cost them X dollars and they're done and they can just implement it very easily. What we're all saying, I guess, is that bringing the different component parts, you're opening up your choice. You're potentially increasing risk in a way, but in a controlled way, because you're specifying very clearly what you want and how you want to achieve it, and then it's about bringing those together outside of the build that already exists. So there's no preset plan where you must have this and this and this. You start to be able to kind of pick and choose what is fundamentally needed to deliver the solution, rather than paying for something that's already been engineered that may be overcomplicated for what you're trying to achieve, or is a compromise on the end result. So that there are ways of using the collaborative approach to let's say optimize costs, not necessarily cheaper, but get the bang for your buck. It's delivering exactly what you need it to do.
Any thoughts?
Getting involved early as well is really critical as well. So obviously the earlier you can get involved with these projects, the more you can make any of the fundamental changes with minimal cost.
So
basically.
Jason, what are you saying? Are you saying literally at the kind of specking out?
Well,
what are you talking about?
I don't know that it necessarily has to be at the specking out stage, but certainly the earlier you can get involved in, the sooner you can start manipulating the whole design of the machine to suit the partners, basically. Yeah. And fundamentally, it is going to be a cost saving, because it's going to save you time to get to that prototype machine, perhaps, and you're less likely to fall down bear traps.
Yeah, sure.
And because many of these people will have been in this situation before, they'll understand what the situation is, and we'll have routes out of those problems.
Jamie, did you want to add anything to that?
I think everybody's put a very strong case forward there. We'd be the same. There's cost benefits and optimizations that can come from preparing your data before it gets to the manufacturing print process and the various stages afterwards. So we always try very hard in our case studies to work with the customers to demonstrate the ROI that they've achieved from it. And that's a key thing when you're making multi-million pound, in some instance, investments in a total project. There's going to be somebody sitting there who wants to know, what's the return on this investment, and how long is it going to get me there? So when all the partners who are involved in a project can come together and deliver that, then that's good for the whole business case of these projects. Yeah.
So let's just think individually, all of you, that current trends, current market opportunities. What's the perfect collaboration for Inca in the next 2 years? What would be the one you'd love? Was that a good question?
You're on fire.
Right.
You're on fire this
start with Simon,
afternoon.
give you time to think about it.
Okay.
Simon.
So, no,
the perfect collaboration, the perfect project. What's it going to be at the moment?
I mean, areas that are growing that get a benefit from Inkjet where the value proposition is tangible, is where we all want to be.
Yeah.
I guess the obvious one that everybody talks about right now is packaging, and in terms of flexible packaging, especially where the opportunity to print on demand, the benefit that Inkjet brings, there's a clear business case for adopting the technology. There's a clear benefit for doing Inkjet. Everybody should win from the adoption of the technology in terms of the consumer, the drive towards circular economy, the OEM, and the customer, the print house itself. So I think there are a number of examples, but those kind of projects where it's something that makes sense. I mean, often we're approached with projects that just on paper are extremely complex and complicated, and finding the justification to leap right into do Inkjet sometimes isn't obvious, but there are some industries where really the case is apparent.
Yeah, I know. I guess I was thinking along the lines of the corrugated, and there'll be opportunities in the corrugated market. You're working with Zund, and they're kind of folding and cutting.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of elements for Inca. There's this whole kind of next industrial revolution, which is industry,
what is that?
Industry 4.0, and automation, minimise waste, less touch points, and our involvement with Zund, and from a robot technology, we're all we're continuously improving and evolving that. But I think, sort of similar to what Simon was saying, that in a way that every one of those is a little bit different and a little bit niche and a little bit bespoke to suit the customer needs. In terms of what would be the perfect project, it will be the analog world in terms of direct to board, adopting digital mainstream in the way that silkscreen did 20 years ago. That would be the perfect for
and I guess the challenge with that is that going back 20 years, the evolution from silkscreen wide format, for example, to digital was a simple evolution. There were lots of machines. What we're talking about now is not necessarily an off-the-shelf machine. Is often a more bespoke project, a bespoke approach.
Choice would be really important.
Exactly, more challenging.
UV 20 years ago was like the next best thing. Now it's, compared to solvent, now everybody's, thinking about water-based, and is that the right solution? The material range, the different types of materials, is paper-based products the key solution?
Yeah, so what you're basically saying is more challenges now, aren't there?
More challenges, yeah.
From the point of view of sustainability, the point of view of short run, point of view of bespoke application, there's lots of things going on, aren't
Absolutely, and there's the materials in that essence are really crucial, because you sort of talk about packaging, but then you've got sheet metal there, you've got paper, you've got the flexible packaging, and I think really we're in this phase for Inkjet is it's almost an adoption and a complementary period while the market and the analog world kind of accepts Inkjet in a way, whereas silkscreen to wide format was almost like I wouldn't say overnight, but but
right. It was a pivot,
more seamless transition.
It was a sort of pivot from one technology to another. Most people bought into it. The trade shows of the time, every year there was new machinery coming out that was doing another job, faster, quicker, bigger. Yeah. So it's a very different world, isn't it? Very different world. For sure. Guys, any thoughts on perfect kind of collaboration, perfect project?
I think Simon was saying, label is obviously it's a massive market, and that's still an area which is up and coming, and we're working very, very hard to try and access that market.
And when you do, is it kind of again off the shelf curing systems, or are you often having to do something a bit quirky to get?
We always try to do something which works for the customer, really, and inevitably it is something a little bit quirky to make it work for them. And it's again, it's back to that collaboration thing. Let's see if we can get involved, and so that we can do these changes. They're relatively simple. Get it done. Let's do them early on. Let's do something which is relatively simple for us to do to save them a massive amount of work.
Yeah. So as a company, one of your kind of USPs, if you like, is the ability to create a flexible solution. In this instance, for curing systems, depending on whatever the requirement is of the machine, of the ink, whatever.
Precisely that.
Yeah, okay.
Precisely that.
And Jamie, just as a thought?
I think, we're really happy with the collaborations, partnerships that we have in place, not only with manufacturers, but also with our customers as well. I think, it's important to, value those relationships with the customer as well. But, as we've come from a traditional or a heritage position of being heavily involved in the transactional and data-heavy environment of transactional printing. But as the market is diversifying, with things like industrial inkjet, that gives us great new opportunities, because all of the great things we've done in our past are very, very applicable in the new application sets. And, I'm finding myself talking to more people in textiles or grand format printing, because people want to do things differently. And still, the technology that we've developed over the last 30 years is applicable in those industries as it is in the heritage. So, where there's a need, then we're happy to collaborate. And I think recently with Kyocera, we've started a European partnership with them where they brought a new technology to market. Okay, it's not that technology isn't particularly new to the market, but their offering is, and they identified they had a gap in what they were bringing to the customers, and we were happy to work with them to fill that space to bring a more rounded solution to their clients.
And was that Kyocera heads or?
It's with Kyocera Document Solutions.
Right,
so for their new Task Alpha Pro 15,000C, which is cut sheet
well
inkjet.
done for remembering that.
I hope they remember it. But it's they had a void in their workflow offering, and we could enable them the opportunity to gain more placements through utilising our software. So there was no redesign of what we do. It was taking a set of off-the-shelf products and applying it to the various customers that they're interfacing with, and that opens up opportunities for them.
And for people who don't know, where's your kind of development team? Where are they based? Are they San Diego? Or?
Mainly in San Diego, right. Yes. We have Hughie, who's in London, but then we also have some guys remote working in the US as well. But the majority of the software engineering takes place in the US.
Sure. So as we kind of come to the end of our session, I just wanted to get maybe one or two final thoughts from all of you in terms of that story around collaboration. We started by just saying that, let's not forget the ink, let's not forget the software. Completely right. This is a kind of very much about the project and designing the project and getting the right partners in. So what's the sort of final words you'd say about this? Simon, as I started with you.
I think it's about rounding a partnership in the right way, bringing together the key skills that you need to deliver a solution, but about those stakeholders really understanding what the customer needs from his solution, why he's chosen Inkjet, what it can bring, and then talking to each other to deliver something. Through collaboration, there's no doubt that you can accelerate projects, get stuff to market quicker, get a solution that the customer can implement more quickly, and ultimately that's a win for everybody. The sooner Inkjet is industrially robust in the market through all of us working together, it can only drive the business forward, and with customers who, frankly, end users don't care how anything's printed as long as the final result is what they expect it to be.
Yeah, exactly. Jason, final words.
Talk to us early, basically.
Yeah.
If you've got problems during the development of your machine, again, come back to us, talk to us. We've got years of experience in these things. All of us guys have got years of experience in these things. So talk to us about the problems, even if they're not necessarily related to our particular fields. We might have seen them before. We might know the answers.
And you might have worked with someone else that you can point in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Matt?
For me, I think, we touch on individual stakeholders and delivering a project, but I think also it's having that collaboration to come together to ultimately collaborate with the end user, the client, to create that client intimacy that makes them feel that though you've delivered what they've expected. And for me, that's fundamentally the most important. And then, you retain them coming back to you and that build a relationship. And if you have that relationship and then good partnership, the client trusts you, and without that trust, there's no collaboration. So,
I think we haven't mentioned it, but trust is really important, isn't it? That that people know that you can deliver, and that you are the specialist in
That's
machine technology. You are the specialist in inks, and that you have all the partners working together for the same aim. I think you're completely right. Jamie, just to finish.
Yep, it's about the openness. It's about that willingness to integrate not only the technology but also the human aspect of it. You know, how we work together as humans is vitally important as well. Respect each other and what each party is bringing together. And I think if you join all of those up together, then the customer's going to get a good experience from this.
Yep. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to the panel for being part of this panel about collaboration, and they've all collaborated very nicely today. If you'd like a chance to have a chat with them, we'll now be in the Remo session. So if you register for the Remo session, you'll be able to come in and meet the guys and perhaps expand on what we've talked about today. So thank you very much. Thank you to my panelists, to all of you, and hope to see you in the Remo session in 5 minutes. Thank you.